Good afternoon. Ed told me I have 3 minutes. We all know how good he is at doing math. I demonstrated that this morning. So, I was Phyllis's handyman. I had known her as a board member at the Office of Protection and Advocacy for a number of years, and I had appreciated her wise counsel on a number of issues. Jim Welch and I had been interns in the Office of Protection and Advocacy. Well, he had been there longer than I had, so any mistakes were his responsibility because he had more experience. And he blames me because I'm older, so it's I should have known better. But in any event, Phyllis advised both of us a great deal, and we got to know her. But when she learned that I used to earn my living as a carpenter, that's when she was like, "Oh boy, I've got some work for you." And so I did. I spent a lot of time in her homes, lying on my back under the sink, fixing things, or hanging shades, or rehanging doors, things of that nature. And in the process, we became very good friends because we had wonderful, wonderful conversations. And in fact, we discovered that Phyllis had a lot of interest in tools. She had a lot of interest in building. I think the story that Teresa had read about her dad having rebuilt his business in Portland, she paid a lot of attention to what he was doing. He told her everything, all the steps he was taking, and so she was very interested in those things. So we had that in common. But we discovered that we had something else in common, which was a love of really greasy breakfast food. And so we would go out for breakfast in various diners in various towns where she lived. And ultimately, like John, we settled on Ryan's Delicatessen in Vernon as having the very best breakfast food, greasy breakfast food, because they had challah bread, French toast, and there was no pretense about the home fries being healthy or anything like that. I'm sorry you dedicated something about health food to Phyllis, because she did not dedicate her life to health. Neither do I. So I would, and as you know, later in her life, it became difficult for her to go to Ryan's. I would pick it up and I would bring it to her place, and we would have breakfast and spend hours just talking. And it wasn't just about protection and advocacy, business and politics, although we did talk about that a lot. It was about our families, it was about life, and it was about the kinds of things that friends talk about. So I always left reluctantly, because I had to go back to work usually, but usually much clearer about what I was going to do over the next few weeks in my job, and also really, really glad that I had a friend like her. Like all interesting people, Phyllis had some contradictions. And we've heard from the advice she gave to Teresa and from the Lieutenant Governor's response that, when she came at you with that smile, you just knew you should do what she said. It was going to be easier. I think that was the experience that Gloria Schaefer shared as well. She was one of these people who had that charming way of being persistent. But she could also confront power in a very, very powerful way and find the words somehow to say what needed to be said. Now this winter I had occasion to do a lot of research into the legislative history behind the establishment of the Office of Protection and Advocacy as an independent entity. I needed to do that research because I needed to make the argument before the legislature that it needed to stay independent. And so I went back to the State Library and I looked through the transcripts on the public hearings, on the bills that ultimately merged together and became the statute that created the Office of Protection and Advocacy. And Phyllis's fingerprints were all over those transcripts. She had testified in a lot of hearings, and she had written a lot of stuff. But there was a surprise in there, something I hadn't realized. There was a hearing in 1977 before the Human Services Committee. And I gather that there had been a planned hearing that evening that was something that had been agreed to by the chairs of the Human Services Committee and that the Connecticut Coordinating Committee on the Handicap had sent out lots and lots of flyers to people urging them to come and testify, and it was about the creation of an Office on Disability, or what ultimately became an Office of Protection and Advocacy. And from what I could gather reading the transcripts, that hearing was canceled very abruptly, just at the last minute. And I know Ed was at that hearing because his name, he also testified. But I just want to read something to you because this was sort of spur-of-the-moment testimony on Phyllis's part, and it's something she said. She was addressing the co-chairs of the committee, one of whom had admitted that the reason they canceled the hearing was they were afraid that there would be a lot of negative activity going on. They were afraid it was going to be a negative event, and they really didn't need to hear from all of those people. They just needed to hear from some experts during the day. The official reason they gave for canceling it was that it was scheduled inadvertently on Maundy Thursday. The day before Good Friday, and it was the day before Passover was due to start. So they couldn't, of course, stick around in the evening and have that. But here's what Phyllis said. At the moment, I have one other issue I would like to address. Today was to be a day of hope, a joyous day, a fruition of long hours of labor, endless meetings, planning, and a ray of light. Today was planned as a coming together of people from across the state, people who are parents and friends, people with varying disabilities, people from agencies, people with many lifestyles, all gathering together to support one bill, one idea, because it is so desperately needed, the concept of an office for the handicapped. To you, this is just another hearing, but to us, it was the only hearing, the most critical bill that we have to support. It was our hearts and our dreams. Several hundred people planned to be here tonight. First big important gathering in the state's history as far as asking for fair and equal treatment for the state's disabled people. Government has never worked on behalf of the disabled as an independent population. Government has only given us welfare and institutionalization and overprotection. We still don't have a mandate on eliminating architectural barriers. We still don't have equal civil rights. We still don't have equal access to employment. We still don't have equal status under the Constitution. This was in 1977. Tonight we were going to change that. We were going to show our numbers, the same numbers that everybody else is always asking us to justify. We were willing to give up a holiday to speak. You were not willing to give up a holiday to listen. It is very sad that we advised the committee 3 weeks ago that this was a holiday, and yet we were assured that there would be no problem. There would be a hearing tonight. It is sad that only 2 weeks ago we double-checked before thousands of notices were sent. And it is very, very sad that with barely 48 hours cancellation notice, the hearing has been canceled. Perhaps the crowning touch, there are many people who cannot be reached because of the time frame. People who will show up here tonight only to learn a lesson in democracy, one of a dark, closed General Assembly, without knowing why the door is shut in their faces. This was the days before email and websites and so on. So it was a big disappointment and a big slap in the face. You will go home tonight. Forget about your jobs and the pressures. Relax with your families. And Jews and Christians alike will pray and ultimately take satisfaction in the outcome of two different but not unrelated highly religious holy days. But disabled people cannot leave their disabilities behind. And when Jews and Christians sit in synagogues and churches this weekend, let you all spend just 1 minute thinking about the disabled people who have been shut out of those religious services because of the flight of stairs that keeps them from entering their own house of worship. Just 1 minute. Pray for their souls and pray for yours.